from the last circle are at the table here as well. It's been a pleasure to join you tonight and a privilege for me to be amongst all these legendary authors.
Hey, I'm Daniel. How are you guys? You know what? I'm not going to talk unless Bree sits down. I swear to God. I mean,
You guys want to come on in?
stand.
It's
Can you guys come in and sit down?
It's got to be more
I know
comfortable
it's
sitting
not
down,
real
guys.
but like 36. So we can pass
If
around
you
the
want to
mic.
come on in and sit down.
Come on in. All right, they don't want to.
Yeah,
They
and if
want to
you-
hang around the edges. All right, okay. Wow. Well, I asked myself, what can I tell you guys that you don't already know? And the answer is, on the big level, nothing. Because if you're here, you know that elements of our government control the drug trade. And that there's a massive slush fund of money that goes to things that you and I might not want them to do. And you and I don't have a share in that corporation that controls the drug trade on the American end. You know that. All I've got is anecdotes, because I've been in this stuff for 15 years now, and I got a couple entertaining anecdotes I'm going to pass on, but the big picture, like you already know. A little bit about me. I was a nobody, went to UCLA. I was an activist back then. I helped coordinate shutting down the UCLA campus during the war in 1972, for which I was like enormously proud of myself. But then nothing. I made a living. I was an advertising writer, producer, did a business show. Then Gary Webb happened in '96, and I hated it. I got really, really upset with the way he was treated. He wrote a story that proved the Contras had been allowed by the CIA to sell enormous amounts of cocaine and basically fueled the go-go 80s. He didn't allow any cocaine in the 80s, and who among us who's old enough to remember didn't? You know, a penny of that went to fight a war that probably none of us would have voted for. And they hounded him out of journalism. He was a reporter at San Jose Mercury News. He was an investigative reporter. The first thing they did was they put him on like the obituary beat. And when he couldn't handle that anymore, he quit. And he went to work as a legislative analyst in Sacramento. Is there anything more boring than that? And when he couldn't handle that, I think he quit again. And you know, I know that he ended up losing his wife. He ended up losing his house. He ended up losing his family. And on the night before they came to pick up the only thing he had left that was of any value to him, his motorcycle, he killed himself. And that's what happened. And that upset me. I mean, by the time he killed himself, I was already like a few years into this. I was just upset with the way he got treated. Wanted out of journalism for telling the truth. So I was doing a business show, and I wanted a slightly larger presence in this town. And I went out to shoot a half-hour pilot. 99 first show up, I was going to call conspiracy. You remember in Search of Leonard Nimoy played reruns forever, you know. And they had 3 stories on the half-hour show, and one of them was like plausible, and the other 2 were. But one of them was plausible. So the story I went out to shoot for the plausible part with Barry Seal in Arkansas, and the murder of 2 kids on train tracks there who had stumbled onto a drug drop, and I did not know when I got there what a drug drop was. Blessedly, very few of us in California do, because this is not where they bring the drugs when they come. This is a big part of where they consume the drugs, but it's not where they bring them. They bring them to an arc of Southeast, and it's the same places where the corruption was worse during Prohibition, where you know sheriffs became powers unto themselves during Prohibition. So from Texas through Florida is you know, with Alabama and Mississippi is where they brought drugs into. So ended up doing a 2-hour documentary on Barry Seal, who was the biggest at that time, the biggest drug smuggler in American history. About $5 billion worth of cocaine, the government's own estimate in the United States during the 1980s to fuel that whole thing. And what I discovered was that he was a lifelong CIA agent. Was that he'd been recruited at the age of 16 because he was an ace pilot in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he went to Civil Air Patrol summer camp there with Lee Harvey Oswald, where the two of them both met the man that recruited him. I'm pretty sure both of them. I know recruited SEAL. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that he didn't recruit Lee Harvey Oswald as well. David Ferry, who those of us who have seen the movie JFK remember from Joe Pesci's like enormously funny performance. I don't know if David Ferry was anything like that, but I'm going to thank Joe Pesci because he certainly put David Ferry on the map, and David Ferry should be. So I ended up doing a 2-hour documentary, and I had made 2 shooting trips to Louisiana, and Barry Seal's widow. Barry Seal was assassinated, okay, in the most public assassination in America, in some time. In 1986, outside of a halfway house in Baton Rouge, because he had, the government said it was because he was informing on his fellows in the Medellin cartel. And they put that story out there because this is about movies and Hollywood. That story was perpetrated by a movie made on HBO, the only movie about Barry Seal to date, to this date, called Double Cross, starring Dennis Hopper. And in that movie, if you watch that movie, you saw Barry Seal was killed by his buddies in the Medellin cartel because he ratted on them after he got busted. The truth of the matter is that on the night Barry Seal was murdered, 3 other top Medellin cartel lieutenants were murdered at the same time on 2 separate continents. Now, drug cartels don't murder 4 top lieutenants all at once. I suppose there may be like an enormous circumstance in which that has happened before. If so, I don't imagine that cartel lasted much beyond that. Drug cartels don't murder their most important executives any more than IBM does. So the story is a lie. Who killed Barry Seal? According to Barry Seal's attorney, he was murdered because of a phone call he made 10 days before he died to then Vice President George Bush, Walker Bush, in which he threatened to expose the Contra cocaine scheme unless the Vice President stopped what was going on right at that moment. Seal was in his house, and the IRS was removing his furniture. Now, he had cut a deal with the government, and I believe he was correct in assuming that he was being double-crossed by the government, because the deal didn't say anything about IRS agents coming into his house and confiscating his furniture. He gave up this, he gave up that, he pled guilty to this, but what he got in return was he implicated falsely the Nicaraguan Contras as being significant players in the drug trade, and they were not. Now, recently, something similar has happened when the Bush and Obama administration both tried to pick on Hugo Chavez as being major or significant in the drug trade, and he is not. Which is not to say that Hugo Chavez hasn't smuggled drugs, not to say that the other example I'm telling you about, they smuggled drugs too, but they were not the bigger players. The DEA has succeeded pretty enormously through the process of indirection. Anything the DEA accuses somebody else of doing, you can assume that the DEA is doing it first. That's just the way it goes. Anecdotes. It's all connected. What I wrote about is connected to what she wrote about, is connected to what happens today. And here's how. Just let me run it through you quickly. While I'm shooting this documentary on Barry Seal, before my 3rd shooting trip down to Louisiana, I started getting death threats. Maybe you never got a death threat before. Your first death threat was nothing like, mate, you look at yourself in the mirror and go, what are you doing this for, boy? You know, what is going on here? You know, they're just, whether it's a credible death threat or not, you don't know. But you know you've got it. Supposedly elements of the Carlos Marcello organization were upset with me down in Louisiana, in New Orleans. So I had occasion, the only time in my life, to phone a guy whose acquaintance I'd made the year previously in Newport Beach, where I'm living now, who I knew had been with the CIA or something like it for like 35 years, and was now retired, he told me. It turned out later that was not the case. He was a nice older man, and I knew where he was from, and I wanted him to like me, and he did, because I wanted him to like me enough to give me a call if like something bad was about to happen. Or, you know, if I had like said something by mistake, you know, that was considered grounds for termination, I was hoping he liked me enough to ring me first. So I called this guy, and I told him I thought I needed a bodyguard to go down to Louisiana. And he recommended a guy he knew named Nick. Highly recommended. Nick was doing movie star, rock star security at the time. Was making $1,000 a day. Nick, I can't pay you that. You know, I'm struggling. I'm stealing money from my business show to pay bills on this documentary, trying to finish it. And he said, well, I'll go for expenses. And I said, well, wait a minute, why would you do that? And he said, well, get friendly. Later, I'll tell you why. Okay. So I meet Nick, and the press that had preceded my meeting him was basically that here was a guy who could kill you with a glance. Okay? That he was not just, he wasn't special forces, he was special ops special forces. That he had been around at everything significant that we had done, including the failed Desert Storm rescue mission during Carter when they tried to get the hostages in Tehran. And so he's a bad dude, right? But when I meet him, he kind of looks, he reminded me of a cab driver. Because he had that kind of soupy mustache, and he couldn't have been more than like 5'8", you know? But apparently he had special skills. And he's a very bright guy. And I asked him one time, I said, what are your qualifications to be recruited into special forces or in special ops, special forces that? And he told me that he wasn't sure, but he allowed that it might have been useful that he'd been arrested 35 times before he was 16 for stealing cars. Go figure. So when I get friendly with Nick over beers in Houston on the way back, and nothing bad happened while he was down there protecting me, supposedly. And so I kind of wondered, you know, was I just being a little, you know, overly dramatic? You know, later the guy who's the CIA/NSA guy in Newport Beach that I met told me, no, that he thought it was important that they showed the flag, he said, and that had served to keep me safe. But Nick and I got friends. We're having beers in Houston on the way back, gonna lay over. Why did you come down here for expenses? He knew Barry Seal. He knew Barry Seal. He knew Barry Seal in Laos. What were you doing in Laos? Well, I was in Laos in '64, he tells me, running an A base in the hills. Well, what's an A base? An A base is a little place where a half dozen special forces guys have established some kind of base with a couple dozen or more Viet Minh, or they Hmong, H-M-O-N-G. Do you know how to say that? Later, he was really upset later because they got a really raw deal. A lot of them didn't get out of Vietnam, and they had been working with guys like Nick for years, and he knew them like as real people, and like they died. But he knew, you know, he ran his A base, and what was your job there? And his job was basically to buy opium from the people that were growing it, surrounding hillsides. And then once a month, he told me, they would push all the opium out to the end of the runway, and they would make a bonfire of it,